Welcome back to the Think Strong pod. How are you doing today, Az?
Very well, firing on all cylinders as always.
Oh yeah, we're going to get into a lot of fitness chat in this one, which is going to be good. We'll start with warm-ups. You're probably wasting your time.
Almost definitely.
So yeah, just a little bit of a story from the other day. I was in the gym training, and I was talking to big Sean McInroy. And yeah, he said he'd finish like one of his last accessory movements, and there was a girl opposite him setting up some bands, and foam roller was out, bit of floor space, and then he transitioned to the bike where he was doing some easy conditioning. And at the time I'd gone over to him, he'd been watching them warm up for like 45 minutes. Banded distractions, banded like arm over the head, lat stretch, every movement you could imagine with a band, 90-90 hip rolls done poorly, some stretching here and there, bit of chat in between. And yeah, it's crazy when you've got people that really care about their time. So like people like us that have stuff to do. We're thinking about like what is your best bang for your buck really when you're warming up. But I think there's something that we see quite often here, don't we? We see people warming up for like however long it might be. But what could people do that would potentially yield a better result?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to understand the demands of what you're going into, right? So, like, if I think about myself personally, I know I've got certain things which I need to do to warm up certain body parts to make sure that they feel good during the session and good after the session as well. Like, I probably could just do some barbell back squats and then get into a working set of barbell back squats, feel good enough to get them done, but then it's like, what's the impact going to be after that? So I do have to take some kind of care of the joints of various different things. So there is going to be personal markers that whether you're on a program or you're working with a coach, that those should be highlighted to you. But understanding like the reasonable limitations of those, and understanding that more just does not equal better. And I think that's the route people can go down. We see people saying, oh, I need to improve my mobility, so I just stretch, or I just do, like I said, banded distractions and things like this endlessly, and just try to get to a point of like 100% mobility, suppleness, and feel like some sort of noodle before they get underneath the bar and expect them to that to make the difference. Although it might feel slightly different, like at the end of the day, if it's mobility that you're trying to improve, like some loaded movements are really going to be things that kind of hold the key for you. And you can shave a lot of time down by actually accessing a bit of mobility work with loaded movements as well. Sometimes that can look like the actual movement that you're going into just dosed at the right intensity. So whether it is 3 sets with just the barbell, that could hold just as many benefits as rolling around on the floor with rollers, bands, if not get you feeling better, because you're still having to gather tension in the same parts of the movement as you're going to have to when you're actually doing your working sets as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think getting a bit lost with like what you need within the position as well. So say, for example, it's a deadlift or a back squat. You want some form of like rigidity to stay tight throughout the movement. So putting heaps of rotation in your warm-ups, probably not the route that you want to go down. At that point, there's nothing to say that you can't add rotation in after you've done that element of your workout to potentially prime you for, say in CrossFit, for example, you have a gymnastics piece coming up, or handstand walks, where you're going to need an element of like scapular and ribcage rotation. It's probably not the time to prime it before you go into your back squat, probably after. And just warm up what you do need for your back squat first. And that therefore it will save you time in that aspect as well. I think that's really important, understanding like what do you need at that point. You don't really want to be going into a deadlift or a back squat feeling loose at any point. I think people can get quite lost with that and not bring any intensity to their warm up. I would say that's probably one of the biggest things that I see. What would you say?
Yeah, I think, like we said, understanding what you need, and that can, like we said, that can come from a lot less than you think. A lot less variation between session to session. I probably have 2 warm-ups which I bounce between, and there'll be an element of similarity even between those two. So, like to use specific examples, if I'm snatching or doing anything overhead, I've got a little press matrix that I run through, and then I will get into my hips one way or another because I'm probably squatting as well, and then I'll move on to like 2 rounds of 2 other movements. But that's the same if I'm snatching or if I'm doing a split jerk or something like that, because it's an overhead movement. I know it ticks the box for both things. You can go down the route of making things so specific and isolating such tiny parts as the movement, which again, it's just time. It's just ticking on and on and on. And what position are you going to be left in when you end up trying to start your session after that? I think what's quite interesting is some elite level Olympic weightlifters will walk straight into the gym and get started on the barbell, or for some people that might be perfect, for some people it might not be, but it's interesting to see that it very much is possible. It's not compulsory for you to do your like 45-minute snowflake warm-up where you're pulling out every single piece of equipment in the gym just to get to your bottom position. I
think with that example you gave of the weightlifting, and even your own like warm-up, with people understanding that you probably only have 2 that you bounce between, like your consistency over time of the exposure to the same movements is only going to yield better results, because your body's used to those movement patterns. It knows what it's doing every single time. Every time you ask your body to do something, it's like, okay, I know what I'm doing here. I feel safe. But with the weightlifting example, the more exposure that they get to the movement, the more reps they get in, like cumulatively over time, at a good intensity, and they're putting like good intention into it. It's only going to make you better. You don't need to do a kettlebell hip shift every time you come into the gym, or force your knee over your toe when you're moving your hips at the same time. So it's not really ankle range that you're improving, your whole system's moving. Yeah. And I think it's kind of what gets lost, is like people believe they're doing the right thing. But just if they had more intention behind what they're doing, it would like put them further towards their goals.
Yeah, I think it's definitely easy to see something and think, oh, I need to be doing that because they're doing it. It's like, if you can squat to your bottom position with no pain, no issues, like after a few sets on the barbell, like you can use that time to go towards, or to put towards your problem areas. If you've got, I don't know, a dodgy shoulder which needs a bit of extra attention, understand that like there's nothing wrong with paying attention to that every single time, and making the most of what you can be a bit more resilient with before going into your sessions. Like you said, intensity that we bring to sessions and like those meaningful reps is actually a whole lot more important, really. Providing we're going to get to those reps with no issues, you're even going to see mobility improvements as a result of a well-performed strength movement to a full range of motion, and kind of optimizing to improve at your warm-up drills can be another thing to get distracted with as well. It might be a good marker, but at the end of the day, you're improving your warm-up and your quality of movement for that working set, not the other way around.
Definitely. I think it leads nicely into this kind of next pathway that we're going to take, which is coaching movements, but also we spoke a little bit about continuums, and it kind of goes along that path, but not so much in a skill way, although training is always learning, so it kind of is a skill. But when we're coaching movements, like some things that we're seeing a lot, and something that was discussed on the course that I went on, was how coaches take people so far away from the intensity and the intent of the movement they're performing, and the movement they give them. So, say for example, RDL, they need to create some stability in their spine, bit of flexion, extension as they're coming through the movement. Client comes in, they're like, oh, I've got a sore back. Trainer goes, okay, we're going to do cat-cows to start off with. It's like, it couldn't be anything further away from like the movement. Like, say the person's doing like 100 kilo RDL, and then the coach just takes them so far away from that, and then they're like, okay, let's go back into and see how. It's obviously not going to feel very good. Like, what else potentially could they do somewhere in the middle there to prime them better? Say if you're in a CrossFit gym, it could be a GHD back extension with load. It could be anything that's going to load the body like that. Do you know what I mean? And just like cat-cows, it's great movement, but it's not anywhere close to that. Do you know what I mean? And coaches tend to take people so far away from what they actually need to get them to feel better within that. So I know that you do this stuff in warm-ups, and it kind of leads on nicely from that, but it's like, how do you best prepare or regress someone through that plane of motion? It could even be someone has a really sore back through that sagittal plane. Can we get them moving into a different plane of motion to begin with? Maybe they are, it's going to sound weird because we spoke about it before, but maybe that person needs some rotation. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it could be like they hold the GHD kind of Sorensen position with maybe 2 dumbbells and they just rotate through, but they still like have that rigid spine, but then they're getting their scaps moving around it. Something a little bit more meaningful there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like scaling a movement, to put it in basic terms. You wouldn't scale a... Let's think about a relevant example. Okay, so you got someone that wants to do bar muscle ups, but maybe can't get the stimulus for the workout. So maybe you tell them to do a kip and chest to bar instead. That would be a sensible scaling option for someone at that level, right? You wouldn't necessarily go and get them to do a single arm banded lat pull down like off the rig, because it's just going to be such a different stimulus and come nowhere near to the desired goal of the workout. And I think the same thing can be said for movement selection and how you're dictating your scaling decisions there, which I think is what you're getting at, right?
Yeah.
Making sure that there's sufficient intensity in the thing that's being given to them to make sure that it has relevance still.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one thing that was spoken about on the course, which is quite cool to talk about, is if you have somebody that is playing sport at a decent level or a high level, he used a tennis player that he coaches as an example. The sport is like in the transverse plane, constant rotation with intensity and at high velocity. But we've spoken about this before, kind of like the functional patterns and stuff like that. It's like, you can just see if they were the coach for that person, they would try and replicate the sport within the gym. So say that person's just played for 3 to 4 hours, potentially, or less, in that transverse intensity, high velocity. Like in the gym, you're probably not going to do much rotation work with them because they've just been exposed to it for so long. So how can you like scale their training but keep intensity? Choose movements that they can't load as well, potentially frontal plane movements, even get them into a sagittal plane just so their body can kind of recover from that transverse plane. People, we've seen like pattern overload. It's seen quite a lot in CrossFit, and in just in sports in general. Like these guys can potentially squat, clean, press ridiculous numbers, but you ask them to do something single-sided and they're just like all over the place. So like regressing someone to a different plane of motion can kind of expose them to something better that they need that can come into their bigger lifts and help as well.
It's actually kind of a form of GPP, right? Is making sure that you've been prepared across the most general kind of the most general way possible. Essentially, all planes of movement, having sufficient exposure to everything, and if one thing is being pushed up, on the spectrum as a result of the sport or even the sport specific training, maybe the time is best spent in other areas to address that. Balancing things out and having that stable base to work from and relying a little bit on that specific prep.
Yeah. I think that would be a good thing for coaches to listen to, is what are we building in the gym? Are we building qualities for people to be able to go and express, or are we doing are we shoulder tackling a landmine?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? We've seen it online. Even if you think about your rugby days, it's you weren't tackling a barbell in the gym, where you was you're doing movements to give you the qualities that you can then go and express.
Yeah, exactly. And that needs to be the mindset. It's pretty much with every sport. And it's difficult with CrossFit, as we've said before, because it's one of the unique things where you're training in the same place and the exact same environment where you compete, and sometimes you can go from a training session to a part of your session where you're actually competing, so those lines get blurred so easily. But that's one thing to bear in mind if you are a coach that's preparing someone for life, that you're in the weight room to build those general qualities. You are training and you're looking for adaptation. The adaptation is the goal, and then if you are going down the route of CrossFit programming, having that definition, even if it's just in your mind, of which sessions are building adaptation and which sessions are expressing that, because that's where we see problems come into play, right? When things are too structured around competing all year round, or too structured around just adaptation, and they get no specific preparation, and that trickles down the chain to movements specifically, as well as trickling down the chain to performance on the other end of the spectrum, if you simply don't have the exposure to things.
Nice. It's just all food for thought for people, right? Isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just nice to have a conversation around it. One thing that we often see is people arguing about progressive overload online. And instead of going and dying on a hill, which most people do within the Instagram space, progressive overload can come in different forms, right? Could be load, could be quality of movement, which some people argue isn't a form of progressive overload. You've spoken about density as well within that. But when you look at how people make progress, it's different for everyone, isn't it? Load is a vehicle for stimulus, but also quality of the movement. Now, the argument that the guy had on the internet was load is the only way that you can progress, meaning the load that you're using for X amount of reps. Say the rep scheme is 4 to 6, you hit the ceiling, and then you try to, it's called the double progression method or whatever. You basically start at X amount of reps to achieve the top of the bracket, and then you change the bracket from there to there. It's just a fucking rep scheme. And then someone was arguing with him, was but what if they fail within the 4 above? Is that still in a hypertrophy rep scheme? But then people are arguing, mechanical tension is the only driver. So there was the load thing, and then somebody was saying that but what about the movement quality? And my argument to that would be, like I mentioned, I could do a dumbbell curl with 25 kilos, but use my whole body to achieve the movement. Or I could use 20 or 17.5 kilos to complete the bicep curl, using predominantly just my bicep to do the work. Therefore, the stimulus would be higher for the contraction that I need in my bicep. So wouldn't that be a driver for stimulus? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think for someone to make a claim that progressive overload can only be achieved with more load, it's probably forgetting. I don't know who this guy is or if he's a trainer or what, but like surely he's trained people where you can see that adding weight is not going to be a good idea for a long period of time. You're going to progress within the movement to enable you to eventually tap into more load and maybe get closer to your ideal of progressive overload through movement quality. There is, I mean, I think that what that says about that person is that maybe they're only ever thinking about machines, where there is no skill component to achieving something. But in my head, I've just got an image of someone doing a split squat, and the difference and the load that you can manage versus 6 weeks of exposure to that movement where you refine the skill. And how close you can get to muscular failure as a result of skill exposure versus no skill exposure is absolutely huge. Even though that might be the main driver to progress, if you can't skip from A to C without going through B. It's like this bar. It's like this metric of quality that you have to get through before you can access that. And even if you're not building muscle, you're building all of the prerequisites associated with then being able to tap into it. And it's how you can say that's not a part of progress. I really don't know.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like you see it in the gym. Like if somebody just took that as like load is the only progression, you see them just like heaving. You see it on like seated cable row or pull down all the time. It's just like the whole body is just like, it's like, get there. If you put them in a position where they could only like maintain the position and use what you wanted them to use with lighter load, they would be failing like so quickly because the muscle doing the work would just fail straight away. So I think it's important for people to understand that load doesn't have to continuously go up on every movement, like every week. Like people are like, how do I know if I'm progressing? Question I get sometimes is like, oh, is the weight where you think it should be? And I'm like, well, it fucking depends how well you're moving. Do you know what I mean? It's like, if the load can continue to go up, but if your movement quality is shit, then you're probably not making progress within that.
Yeah, for sure. And that ability to develop other traits that come with not just focusing on load progression, there's so much evidence for it as well. When you look at methodologies for strength cycles and things, I always talk about 5-3-1 and how you've got AMRAPs there, and the load is increasing, but the main driver is the AMRAP, where you're putting intent into slightly heavier loads. And that's not coming from a massive load increase when you're making progress. That's coming from the intent that you're putting into an AMRAP, and like things like that, and how effective that can be. The list of evidence I think is kind of endless when you look at not just that, but also how tempo can affect someone's ability to acquire a skill and then tap into various different things. What else? Like we said about density, doing more work in the same time, the same work in less time. So many different things. And I think, like we said, where that mindset comes from seems to be maybe that kind of A to B movement where you were performing something on a machine, as opposed to understanding that you can tap into so many different things with different methodologies, but sometimes that's only exposed to you when you are doing slightly more technical movements that require an element of skill acquisition.
Yeah, I think people overlook the complexity around it, right?
I think maybe it's this perpetual need to reduce any instability. How you see people with foam rollers and stuff on the cable machines and cuffs and XYZ, just to reduce the complexity of something. That in itself also reduces the nuance and the evidence that certain traits can be acquired and contribute to progress, as opposed to just being load. Because if you had to deal with that instability, you would realize that you can progress in multiple different ways. But if the goal is just to reduce the moment arm in any opportunity, it kind of leans into the theory that what they're saying, that load is the only way to progress.
Yeah, and I think it's like, it's just important to understand where that load is being distributed. It's probably the main thing I would say with that. But yeah, I don't really have much else on progressive overload today. Just wanted to give people a bit of an idea of what they should really be thinking about.
Yeah.
There's a reason that like movement or mechanics is always at the bottom of the pyramid. Do you know what I mean? Like you said, it's like, here's your start point. Movement and mechanics is first. Then, like, I think CrossFit, they still use MCI. Mechanics, consistency, then intensity. So it's like, why would you just focus on I?
Yeah.
Without doing the other two as well?
Yeah.
Someone asked me about some movement the other day, and they were like, "Oh, the reps didn't change." So yeah, but you could improve the quality of the reps that you did do with that. And they were like, "Oh yeah, it's like you don't." Like, you would just complete fitness after like 6 weeks, if not. You would though, wouldn't you? Do you know what I mean? It's like, you've moved from 8 reps to 10 reps to 12 reps to 50. We're done.
Yeah.
You never have to do that ever again. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's such a retarded way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Probably will get cancelled for that word, but
now it's back in, I think. It's back
in fashion.
Yeah, the only other thing on progressive overload is from like a programming standpoint as well. I know we've done a whole episode, I think, on like relative intensity, but that's sometimes a mindset they can get that can catch people out, in that they think that progressive overload does only mean adding weight, and sometimes that can look like 5 kilos, 10 kilos, 5 kilos, 10 kilos, and not understanding that there is actual percentage progressions you can be following if you are going down a like a proper strength methodology that will yield much better results because they're more gradual. So even within that, if you are prioritizing intensity or load being the way that you are progressively overloading, understanding how to do that properly can, like I said, yield better results too.
Yeah, I think everything around it that comes into that conversation as well, it's like, how long has the person been squatting for or bench pressing? It's like, it just makes no sense. Yeah. Like, progressive overload to that person, to you doing a back squat makes no difference. Makes like the biggest difference to someone else who has never had the bar on their back before. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's not just like load. For you, percentages is going to be where you want to be starting and moving to get to your end goal. For the other person, it's going to be probably not even having the bar on their back to begin with.
Yeah.
Learn how to squat and then move into that.
It's like a reductive, I think is the word, or reductiveness, like just to reduce anything to like the most basic principle, but you just ignore all nuance there. And whether that's just been said to be poignant on socials or not, I don't know. But at the same time, it's shutting the door to so many different parts of fitness, strength and conditioning, weightlifting, bodybuilding, all of these different areas, which, you're completely ignoring the evidence that comes from them if you're saying that.
Yeah, and I guess it's people. The guy has a big following, and it's like the people listen to what they say. And it's good why we have like these conversations, is to bring some kind of nuance to the conversation.
Yeah, you can get pushed into an echo chamber just from your own like confirmation of a big following, right? If people are just only there ever supporting you, you're going to be pushed into thinking like Joel Seedman or someone else as equally as dumb.
Yeah, it's crazy. 90 degrees for the win. Haven't seen much of him recently.
Hopefully he's been cancelled or thrown in the sea.
Cool. We're going to wrap up there. Some nice fitness chat for you guys to get stuck into. Please like, share, subscribe. Give us a follow. Share the pod. See you on the next one.
See you on the next one.